came back on immediately, but all the houses across the street were dark, and crews were out pretty late. I don't know what happened.
You know?
It sounded like something blew up, actually, like a transformer. I'm not sure, but yeah, it flickered off, and I got kicked offline for a few minutes during the SRO discussion. Thankfully, it came back. I don't have Zoom on my phone either. Brenda was like, "Can you get on Zoom?" I'm like, no, I don't have.
I know it's been a little shaky this week for some reason.
All right, we are good to go.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll go ahead and get the meeting started, and Councilmember Patron might join us in a few minutes, hopefully. So we're going to get the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for September 24th, 2020 started. Our first item on the agenda is Public Transit Ridership Report for the month of August and transit ridership fares. So we have staff here, Taylor, to give us an update on public transit.
Yeah, thank you, council member. And I have the report here on my screen, and I thought I'd share it just as I kind of gave some highlights from it. See if I can get my technology to work. And that way I can run through it with you guys as I give some of the highlights here. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right. So for the month of August, we had just about 16,000 passengers on the fixed route system. We're still seeing that decrease compared to last year due to the ongoing pandemic. So we're monitoring ridership closely. As you can see with this graph here, the blue is last fiscal year, the red being this fiscal year that just started in July. We've had an uptick ever since April after that dramatic decline. So we kind of stalled out from July to August, but again, staff are monitoring the ridership very closely. And then for paratransit here, we had 1,341 passengers in August, which again is a decrease compared to last year. But you'll see that steady increase again ever since April. And so watching the paratransit side of things closely as well. Long-range plan update. We are continuing to meet with Nelson Nygaard bi-weekly, and they mainly been focused on the historical data needs and putting together an existing condition report. And so they're hoping to wrap that up soon. And we're putting the final touches on an outreach plan that we're continuing to work with them on as well. We're hoping to start engaging the public soon, as well as you guys and staff here on what they think the transit system could be in the future, and trying to get that process started. And then some general transit updates. I think I've updated you guys on this last month, but just wanted to hit it again. That Saturday service started in August on the 15th for the first time since January 2019. And we also operated on our first home game regular community service, that is on September 12th. And it's the first time that we've operated the community service in recent memory. OU always operated a game day shuttle, but we never really operated routes out into the community. So that's very exciting. We used the old Central Library parking lot off of Webster and Tonawa as a temporary bus hub for those home game days, just because the Brook Street transfer station's a little too close to the activity and the road closures and traffic. So it went pretty well. So we're pretty excited to keep doing that and seeing how the ridership responds. And then August 10th, we had our first day of the commuter route being operated solely by Embark OKC, and that route has been expanded to offer 9 runs daily rather than the 6 that was being offered between the 2 entities, Norman and OKC. And Embark OKC staff are monitoring that route closely and hoping to see a ridership increase with the expanded service. And so with that, I also have the more in-depth ridership report here with all the numbers for you guys to look at. I can email out this report if I need to, since it wasn't included in your agenda, but I'll take any questions you guys may have.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. I appreciate the update. Are there any questions? Hands up from council members?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. So Mr. Johnson, on the Saturday service, do you have any sense of numbers of riders that took advantage of the Saturday service so far?
Yeah, I think we were wanting to make sure we had a few more under our belt
Okay,
just before we started giving out the specific information, make sure we get a true average going, if that's okay, council member.
that's fair.
Okay.
I'm just so curious because I think as a council, we've identified that as a need. So I'm sure it's going to take a little time to build support and make sure that the word is out and that sort of thing. But I am, cautiously optimistic that it's going to fill a need like we are expecting it to. So I just wondered what your sense of it is. And
Okay.
then the home game piece, that may be the same answer, but how did we promote that? And were you pleased with the number of riders that actually used the service that day?
Yeah, and again, I think probably more comfortable reporting the ridership and comment on those numbers next month, but we're pleased with how the operations are going on Saturdays, and Michael from Embark's on here, so he may be able to speak to the promotion more than I can in detail, but we've done a lot of sponsored Facebook posts trying to get the community to see those, and then we've done some specifically for the game day operations as well.
Okay.
And so with the city of Norman, social media sharing those. So we've tried to get the word out. And as you said, we'll probably see that awareness get greater over time. But we do believe it's filling a need. If you can imagine, if transit's your only ridership option and only having access to it Monday through Friday, Saturday, if you don't have to work, you can run some errands. It's a big change for some folks. So we're pretty excited.
Oh, I am too. And I know, one of the other needs that was identified, oh gosh, probably as early as last fall is, of course, this is all pre-pandemic, but, not having that Saturday service was really a detriment to some of our local businesses being able to fill jobs because they weren't able to get, they had people that they were interested in hiring, but those future employees had no way to get to work on the weekend. And so that was also, obviously adversely affecting the person who was trying to get a job, but it's also adversely affecting some of our employers that are trying to hire people that need transport, that are completely dependent on public transit to get to work. So I'm just so pleased that we could take the step. And so I'm really hoping that we're going to see some good results and some good ridership from it. My other question was just about, it's perfectly understandable, I think, to see the decreases in ridership. But if you could just refresh my memory on what kind of social distancing measures we're taking on the bus, because I'm wondering if the decrease in ridership is not just maybe less people that would be using public transit, but if we still have social distancing and safety precautions, then do we know if there are more riders that can't get on a particular bus because we're limiting how many people can be on the bus?
Sure. And yeah, just a quick reminder, we are limiting capacity on our both fixed route and paratransit. For fixed route specifically, it depends on the length of the bus. So a 40-foot bus can obviously fit a few more folks in it. But I believe for a 35-foot bus, we can fit 10 people with the social distancing guidelines that are in place. And so our operators are following that closely. We have signs on seats so people don't sit next to each other. And we're still following that. And if the bus is full, meaning hitting those capacity limits, unfortunately, we're having to pass up people at bus stops if they're waiting, just because we're trying to put the safety of those on board and those that are waiting first. I think from my conversations with Embark staff, we're not passing up a ton of people down here in Norman, and so that is a plus. I think some folks are still kind of getting through the pandemic and may be working from home more. And so we do still have the capacity guidelines in place, or the capacity constraints in place just due to the current social distancing guidelines.
Well, and I'm really happy to hear that, obviously, but I just was wondering if that was a factor in some cases, and how that would be reflected in that decreased percentage too, because possibly we're at capacity and had to, you know, like you said, pass along from maybe some other people that wanted to get on the bus. So it's not, I guess the way I'm interpreting it, that's why I was asking the question, is that decreased ridership is based on not a single factor, but possibly multiple factors.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. I have a question too. Maybe you can shine some light, or just for clarification anyway. We've been talking about grants a lot on other issues in the city, and it came up a few times Tuesday night about grants for buses and things like that. And so I was wondering if you might be able to mention how we were able to, the grant process, or the way we were able to get a recent bus and the matching grant and where that comes from. I don't know if you might be prepared to talk about that. We could wait, I'm sure, but I heard it mentioned several times Tuesday, so I thought this might be a good chance to talk about it.
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly. I just want to clarify one thing. The city of Norman hasn't really purchased a large transit bus yet since we started operating. And so that's probably one of our next big steps this fiscal year, is to begin that procurement process, because they do take anywhere from 12 to 15 months to get one of those buses in once you order them. So it's a long drawn out process, and you got to keep those vehicles that we have running for that entire time period. And we've been trying to throw some darts at the wall to help with the funding, go after as many grants as we can and give council as many opportunities as possible to maximize our local dollars. And one of those grants you saw on Tuesday, council member, was from OKDEQ. It's part of the Volkswagen Settlement Trust. If everybody remembers, there was an issue with some of the emissions for Volkswagen, and there was a settlement, and this money kind of trickled down from the feds, and the state of Oklahoma got to figure out what they wanted to do with it. And $3.5 million was allocated to on-the-road vehicles, including transit. And we could apply up to 50% for a battery electric bus. And that's what you saw on Tuesday, was about $450,000 for a $900,000 battery electric bus, which would be our first electric vehicle, I think, in Norman, and for sure first transit bus. So we're pretty excited to go after that opportunity, but it's not a for sure thing. And that's why, but we want to maximize our dollars as much as possible and be able to start modernizing our fleet. I think our staff memo said it best, but 8 of our 13 fixed route vehicles are past their useful life. Obviously they're still on the road, but we need to be in a better state of good repair for our transit fleet. So I hope that answered your question. I rambled a little bit, but.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. I wasn't quite sure if we had actually received a grant or gone through any purchase like that yet, but from what I understand, we just approved going after it. And I assume that if the city does get that grant, the city council at that time would then have to vote to accept it, just like we normally would. And you did mention that it would be a matching fund, so we would have to come up with sounded like around $400,000 to $500,000
Right.
for that particular thing, and that would come out of, I assume, the transit fund, the public transit voter approved fund, or that's where we would ideally try to find it, I guess. So, yeah.
Right. Just to keep, because things change so often, as you all know, I think we listed 3 different funding sources in that agenda item. So we wanted to keep it flexible for you guys in our finance department. But yeah, ideally it would come from the transit fund.
Okay. And just to clarify too, there's no other local funding partners that help us with transit, right? The city of Norman is the sole entity. I mean, we get federal funding, but in the state of Oklahoma, the county, the state, OU, Norman Public Schools, none of them help fund the public transit system. Is that right?
Great question. We actually do get a little bit of extra local money.
Norman Regional House.
Norman Regional, they allocate about $50,000, or they do allocate $50,000 a year. And we're grateful for that. They've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, even when I was at OU. And that helps us with the paratransit service, and they realize that's a great community service for their patients. But in addition, you'll see this on your October 13th agenda. There's a funding source called the State Transit Revolving Fund that legislators at the state level allocate about $5.7 million for the whole state transit agencies, and you have to every year apply for it and report your revenue miles, and it's based on a formula. But we're getting about $134,000 from that this year, which is considered local money. And then I had one more off the top of my head, but those are probably the two biggest ones, in addition to what the city of Norman, which is obviously giving the lion's share.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification information, Taylor. I think that's very helpful for folks to understand how public transit's working in Norman. Are there any further comments from council members about this particular item?
I'm not seeing.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead and move on. I do just want to remind everybody that's watching, thank you, Taylor, that's watching at home, council members too, anybody that in this committee, generally the last Tuesday or last Thursday of the month, we talk about public transit. We get the ridership numbers updates. We can talk about transit stops that if you see one that you think needs a bench or a shelter, let us know. We can make those requests and try to get them done. So anybody that's ever interested in public transit and how it is working in the city of Norman, please feel free to tune into this meeting every month. And if you have questions, send them to us and we will definitely make sure they get asked and answered on the record. So just want to make that public service announcement there. So anyway, we'll move on to item number 2, which is a discussion regarding protected bike lanes. This is really something we'll send on to the Bicycle Advisory Committee, but I kind of wanted to give some direction about, at least for what I'm looking for them to take a look at. And for me, it's an issue in Ward 7, but it's something that we've had multiple people contact council about over the years, that we're building bike lanes and that's great. And they're colored bike lanes, which is even better. But some have requested that we look into actual protected bike lanes that in different areas. So I would like to talk about that or give some direction to the Bicycle Advisory Committee to discuss that further and give some recommendations because we have a lot of road projects coming up in the future that are going to be building bike lanes all over the city. The most recent transportation bond back in April 2019 approved over 5 miles of new bike lanes in the city of Norman over the next 10 years. So that's something I wanted to look to. The specific issue in Ward 7 that I wanted to ask the committee to take a look at is at the intersection of Highway 9 and Southeast 12th Avenue. The bike lane goes across Highway 9 on 12th Avenue, and it interacts with traffic coming off of Highway 9 and turning on to go south on 12th Avenue Southeast. And I've had a lot of questions and emails from residents down there about how the traffic from the highway is merging into the bike lane very quickly. And there's no protection for bicyclists. There haven't been any accidents that I'm aware of yet, but I have just been contacted about it many times ever since it's been finished. And I have gone down there and taken video of what is going on myself that I can share with anybody that's interested. So that's kind of what I wanted to look at, have the committee look at, is that specific issue that's going on at 12th Avenue Southeast and Highway 9, but also just in general, the future of bike lanes in Norman and looking at maybe some protection, further protection than we provide now with just a painted line. So any comments from council members about this specific thing? I don't know if staff really has a presentation about it or anything. This is really just more giving direction to a committee. So Councilmember Hall.
So I'm just curious, do we even have any protected bike lanes in Norman? I really don't know.
None that I can think of, no.
So, let's see, I guess it would be Mr. O'Leary. Could you describe what, what are the categories of bike lanes that we do have currently?
Thank you, Counselor. I've got just kind of clarify staff assignments here. I've got David Riesland with me. David is now our interim transportation engineer. Angelo has officially been out of here for a week, and we're already struggling without him, but David has agreed to step in and help. So from the standpoint of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, we share that staff liaison with our Parks Department. So Judd is with us too, and I think James Briggs and Angelo had been staffing that committee for the last, goodness, 15 years that I can remember. And so David will step into that role along with James. But to answer your question, David might be a better help for me, but we do have an adopted bicycle plan here in Norman. We publish that. That's one of the things that the Bicycle Advisory Committee does. We update that plan, the maps and the categories, as you mentioned. In the last probably 5 or 6 years, we've moved into the on-street bike lane world, as Councilmember Hallman mentioned, with the colored green bike lanes and the striped bike lanes on street, new street projects. So Lindsay Street would have been one of our first cases. Cedar Lane Road was actually our first one, I think, before Lindsay Street. And we're just now finishing up 2 miles of on-street bike lanes on 24th Avenue East. So we're kind of moved in that world of on-street, separate striped, and some would call those protected bike lanes. The stripe is considered in the industry a protection, but I think maybe Councilmember Holman is moving more in that direction of other physical devices, so curbs, barriers, other kinds of devices that physically separate the cars from the bikes and the strollers and so on in that bike lane. Besides that, we have a number of other categories of bike-friendly streets, and that's listed in that bike plan. Judd or David might be better than I am to recall the terms, but you'll see signage that are established by that Bicycle Advisory Committee that this is a bicycle-friendly location, but it doesn't actually have the bike lane designated on it. We also have off-street bike lanes, lots of bike lanes that way, bike hike trails, Legacy Trail. We have 10 miles of Legacy Trail now in Norman that is a bike-friendly off-street bike lane. In fact, we're finishing the next mile of that right now. If you haven't been out there, Highway 9 is a very active construction zone between 36 and 48. So we are finishing the next mile of our march going to Lake Thunderbird. We're trying to get to at least 72nd Avenue along Highway 9. Been working on that for a number of years. What else have I missed, Judd or David, in terms of bike lane categories?
I think you've got it covered. The only thing that I would throw in, I guess, or add into that would be, I'm not sure if it qualifies as a protected bike lane, but we have separated lanes. We're constructing a lot of it going out Highway 9. That's been under construction for a while, still under construction. Most of Legacy Trail is separated from the roadway. Not sure if that qualifies as a protected lane or not, but they're not mixed in with or right adjacent to the traffic. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in, and again, all that can be discussed. But what you said, Sean, about the shared lanes or whatever, designated bike routes include a lot of riding in streets. And that was a program that was adopted by the bike committee years ago when the plan was first developed, and by city council too, when that was all finished. And there's many streets in town. You've probably all seen signage to share the road basically with bicyclists.
I actually am quite a bike rider myself in Ward 4 in particular. So I'm aware of some of the different types of ways that you can use the street or the lane and that type of thing. And so I definitely want to, pursue this discussion and learn a little bit more about it, because I'm not exactly sure what a protected bike lane means, and I'd like to learn more about that. I also feel like this is a really relevant discussion today because I think one of the opportunities of living through a pandemic is how we're going to see alternative ways of getting around and going to work or not going to work or staying at home. And I think we've already seen a pretty dramatic decrease in the use of cars. I've just gotten my third rate decrease from my auto insurance company, which I am grateful for because we're not driving our cars. And so I think this is a really timely discussion to think about how we want to look at that going to the future. And are we possibly reaching that crossroads where quite a few of us I know are interested in really embracing a multimodal way of getting around. And so I'm wondering, what the possibilities are, what a protected bike lane means, how you decide which kinds of streets, what arteries that you would do that on. Because, as much as I really appreciate having bike lanes along Lindsay, in all honesty, I'm way too chicken to ride my bike on Lindsay and would take any other route possible to not ride my bike on Lindsay. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that, although I do see a lot of people, using their bike in that way. So I am really open to what the possibilities are and learning about how we might really take a pause and wonder what post-pandemic Norman is going to look like. And I know there's a really high interest in Norman in embracing multimodal transportation, not having the car the star of the show. So any light that we can shed on that, great. If it's something that we want to have our bicycle advisory committee take a look at, I'm in full support of that and very interested in it. So I appreciate having the discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Patron, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. So I've had some questions about from the public about how our bike lanes have been funded and how they came about. So while we're on this topic, and then I have a second component about this particularly. So if Mr. O'Leary, maybe you can refresh memories here.
Sure, happy to, Councilmember. I'll mention as I'm looking at you and thinking about Ward 3, the other thing we didn't mention was road diet.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of success, and I think one of our most successful cases is on Main Street, West Main Street in Ward 3. Fairly controversial at the time. Lots of neighbors, and your predecessor, Councilmember Castleberry, had some real heartburn over that, but it has been a thriving success.
It has.
And all the bad things that the car drivers were telling us about have not happened, and it's really worked out well. So there's a case where the cost of that was paid for by the city through your capital fund. And frankly, the most expensive part of that is the green paint, if you will, or it's actually an epoxy material that we use. And that's one of the debates we continue to have is, do we continue to do the colorized bike lanes? They are fairly expensive. Put that into context for you, on the Lindsay Street project, the colorization of that mile was about $250,000, about $250,000. So it can be expensive. The striping, of course, is much less costly. The source of funding for most of the recent on-street bike lanes has been federal funding, and that's why we do it. We get more points for designing multimodal roadways. And so when you include an on-street bike lane, you have a better chance of getting the federal funding. And then the federal funding helps to pay 80% of the cost of that bike lane. So it's been a really effective program. Cedar Lane Road, Lindsay Street, now 24th Avenue East are all in that category. And the only other thing I can think of is a few years ago, I'm saying about five or so years ago, when the Bicycle Advisory Committee was trying to resurrect the old bike lanes. Judd mentioned this, that we've had on-street bike lanes in some of our neighborhoods all over Norman, and they sort of went by the wayside. We stopped maintaining them, we stopped striping them, and then we brought them back here about 5 years ago. And the funding for that striping was paid for through your capital fund in a special Bicycle Advisory Committee allocation.
Thank you. So the next question, I guess, is more of a comment. For one, I'm very interested in letting the Bicycle Committee have a look at this. I also would like to have a look at what some other communities do. And one of those is rain gardens as that barrier to help with stormwater. So I'm going to show you a picture. It's not a pretty picture, but it's just a quick Google image. Because there are many communities that are kind of giving them dual purpose. And I know that our staff could come up with a lot better image than this, so we would make it look better, but it's just essentially having that barrier be something that can help us with some runoff. So if Councilmember Holman, if we could ask them if there are ways to do some dual purposing and in places where it would be helpful, especially if the Stormwater Division and Mr. O'Leary could tell us, because it may be a little bit more expensive, I don't know, but where that could, and there may be grant funding available if it is serving a stormwater or environmental purpose. Just something to investigate so that it's, the safety component is obviously very important. My ward has been, I have seen people out using kids on them, even going from one neighborhood to the next. It is a safer way to travel on a bike. So yeah, I'm very supportive of continuing this discussion and sending it on to the committees to investigate.
Thank you, Councilor Patron. I would agree. I would definitely like to see some, kind of a comprehensive list of what other cities are doing or have done, innovative ways, whether it be incorporating bike lanes into stormwater management, different ways they might be using to do protected bike lanes. And I appreciate Sean bringing up the colored bike lanes. I know that I've had a lot of people over the years ask about that, the cost of them. We've had some bicyclists express that they don't like to ride on them because they collect debris, and we've kind of addressed that with our street sweeper issue, but I don't know that we're able to hit them as often as we might need to satisfy the avid bicyclists and their use of them. I definitely would like to look at some other ways or other options that cities might be using to do colored bike lanes, maybe some less expensive ones, because that has been always something that's been on my mind about these is the replacement of the green texture, how long it lasts, how much it costs to put in, and how durable it is, and maybe what some other options out there are that we could use going forward on our future bike lanes. And I also appreciate you mentioning the resurrection of the old existing bike lanes that were around town. Biloxi and Beaumont and McGee and Brooks were a couple of them that had them, and they had faded away over the years, and then we've gone back in and restriped them. And so that's been a real exciting thing. I think McGee is one that's actually had the green paint or the green stuff applied to it as an old existing bike lane. So very excited to see that part. Is there any other comments from council committee members? Councilmember Peacock.
Yeah, mine dovetail nicely into Councilmember Patron's comments. Really, I think the idea is that we just want to get separation between the car traffic and the pedestrian traffic, the bike traffic. That can look 1,000 different ways. And if you don't mind, I actually have a link that I'm going to post in the group chat. It is coincidentally titled a bike lane that any city can afford to build. So the idea here is that These are all low cost, low impact options that really just kind of along the lines of tactical urbanism. They test out concepts before dedicating big public dollars to big infrastructure changes. So I think this is a great project, these protected bike lanes, to go and kind of test some concepts in different areas and just kind of see what works, and then maybe take it a step down the road and actually do fully engineered solutions. So I encourage everybody to kind of go read that article and give your thoughts.
Your Honor, tactical urbanism is my new favorite word of all time. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That was great.
I can't take credit for it. You should go research it. It's some amazing stuff. There's some great groups out there doing some cool things.
Thank you, Councilor Peacock. Any other comments, questions from committee members?
Councilmember Nash?
Yeah, I just pulled up that link, and the first thing, saw little plants separating the traffic from the bike lane. And obviously the physical barrier isn't going to be that much, but just having that object that stands up a few feet tall that will make people feel a lot more safe when they're in that lane, and they have a little more confidence that maybe the cars and traffic going by will identify that there's this invisible wall between them and their lane. That link's got a lot of really interesting designs that it just makes a lot of sense.
I got one more point on that. Kind of what you're describing is this theory called you make the street safer by making it more dangerous. Basically, when you put things like on-street parking or street trees really close to the road, it forces people to kind of consider that these are objects in the peripheral and they got to slow down a little bit. So even just that visual barrier, the plants or I've seen even just the little plastic poles, it's just enough to kind of set your mind in that right frame. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up.
Okay. Don't see any other comments or questions. So I appreciate everybody's input on this one. Like I said, the kind of sort of motivation, at least in my ward, to kind of get this conversation started was the 12th Avenue Southeast and Highway 9. I just sent a couple of videos I did to City Manager Pyle to show kind of what is going on there. It's interesting. If you get a chance, I would encourage anybody to go down and check it out. It's very nice having it. And it's the whole area is a vast improvement over what it was like before. And so it just has this one little thing about it that I keep getting comments about. So anyway, but I think it would be very worthy to look at all these ideas throughout the city, especially since voters have told us and approved a significant investment into bike lanes, on-street bike lanes. I should clarify, on-street bike lanes, over the next decade at least. So appreciate that, and I look forward to hearing an update from the committee whenever they've done some work on it. So
I'll be happy to carry that for you, Councilor. I would just say that you have a wonderful bicycle advisory committee. They are one of my favorites and hardworking folks, very dedicated, and they have been that way for many, many years, despite all the new members that have rotated through. They're just a terrific group of folks, and we like working with them, and I know they'll take your direction well, and we'll bring it to them as soon as we can.
thank you so much. Okay, item number 3 is a discussion regarding maintenance of the Brant Park Duck Pond. And so the reason why I put this one on the agenda is I've had a lot of people ask about it over the years, even more so recently, given the current state, the visible appearance of it, I should say, from the road. So it is on campus. It is owned by OU, from what I understand, but it is in Ward 7. It's within the boundary of Ward 7 and right up against the boundary of Ward 4 along Brooks. I grew up in this area, very close to the duck pond. When I was a kid, we used to walk up to the medieval fair when it was at the duck pond. I miss it being at the duck pond. It was really cool there. And then we always would walk past it, of course. My dad and I would walk to the OU football games, we'd always walk past the duck pond back when you could park on Lindsay Street along the street and go to the duck pond. And you know, in a lot of old promotional photos and videos of Norman, the fountain at the duck pond was always used in those photos and videos as a prominent feature of Norman as you were coming into campus from the east or going out. And so I've definitely noticed that fountain hasn't worked in years. The university recently replaced the middle bridge. A lot of folks have expressed their frustration with how that project came about and looks. But also the duck pond is really a stormwater channel as well. So it's of extreme importance to the city, I think, from that standpoint. And so I've had some people ask about it, and I wanted to just kind of start a discussion about it, give some history about it maybe, and talk about what we might be able to do if there's something we could work with the university on as far as an effort to do a better upkeep of it. I'm not sure exactly how we might be able to get the fountain working again, that type of stuff. And even if there would ever be any interest with the university in swapping some land with us for it. We still do have the big square chunk of land in the runway of the airport that we don't need and aren't going to use. You might be interested maybe in swapping that for some easement or around the duck pond, the stormwater channel that would allow us to maintain it. I'm not sure. Don't know if we're in a position to financially maintain it better than they can, but I definitely just wanted to have this discussion because I feel like that area is a very important piece of Norman and OU history. And for those that don't know, it was the original golf course actually, before the Jimmy Austin was built. The Duck Pond Grant Park was the original golf course from what I understand from the Norman history pages I've been following. So I don't know if staff has any information they'd like to share specifically about this. Might start
Thank you,
there.
Counselor. Yeah, happy to. And I wasn't quite sure where you were headed on this topic, so I asked Dr. Evenson to sit in with us and she can share a little bit of information for you that she's learned recently from our OU partners. But just to confirm, you're exactly right. The land is completely owned and operated by the University of Oklahoma. We don't even have easements there. Like most of our portions of Bishop Creek and Imhoff Creek, we have no easements. So the city can't even legally enter the space to do anything, nor do we. And it is also a regulated FEMA floodplain. So any work that takes place in that space, and OU has gotten floodplain permits with us in recent years, anything they ever do has to go through our city floodplain permit committee before they're authorized to do any digging or filling. So just with that, I'll just let Dr. Evenson kind of take you through. She's learned that there might be some work coming forward by the OU General Services Public Works group out there. Carrie?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yes, so some of the changes that are out there are fairly normal for a pond of its age with that kind of organic input that it receives on a regular basis, shall we say. And I will say some of the changes around the water's edge that you've seen are actually OU working with the Oklahoma Water Survey and their pond program, which is protect our natural detention, basically looking at ways that they can minimize shoreline erosion. And by not mowing right down to the water's edge and allowing those aquatic plants that you're starting to see come in around that edge, that's actually helping to prevent erosion from occurring around that pond right now. So there's some beneficial activity going on there. But there's also, they recognize some work OU does, that's some work that needs to be done. I spoke to Matt Rahm a couple of weeks ago. He's the director of their facilities maintenance division. And they have a project plan to do some rehab of the duck pond. I think it's in the early stages right now. And there's not much that I can share on that end. I did ask that, and he said that he would involve me as we move through that process, just so that I can provide whatever assistance I can from this side.
Thank you for that.
Dr. Everson, oh, Your Honor, just
Go
a
ahead.
question on that subject. I had a question from a homeowner on Trout, just north of that part of OU. And he'd indicated he thought we did some curb work out there or some stormwater management on Trout recently. I went out and drove it, and I didn't see anything that looked like newer construction on our part. I'm assuming we have a plan somewhere that kind of outlines what the storm drain flow looks like from north of the duck pond down into that neighborhood. Do you have like a topo map or something that would kind of show me how that water moves?
Yeah, we have on our interactive map on our website, you can see both the contours as well as the stormwater infrastructure, the floodplain, and where our creeks and stream channels actually are. So if you put those up in combination, that's what I use when I want to figure out exactly how the water is going to flow in a particular neighborhood. And that interactive map is on our city website. It's really quite user-friendly.
There, I'll just mention that Trout Street is actually upstream from the duck pond. And we did recently, about 2 weeks ago, finish a major reconstruction of Page Avenue, which intersects with Trout. And Page Avenue, if you're familiar with the area, is the southern boundary of a brand new parking lot facility that the OU folks are building or rehabilitating. And it may be the future location of a parking structure, we think. So anyway, Page Street was in really tough condition, city street, and we coordinated with OU and did our share to reconstruct that prior to the semester kicking in with traffic. That might have been what they were referring to.
Thank you for the information, Carrie and Sean. I think that's pretty valuable. Are there any comments? I see Councilmember Patron's hand up there.
Yeah, Ms. Evenson, I didn't realize you were on the call, or I would have brought you in on the last stormwater conversation. Do you know, Councilmember Holman was talking about the old fountain. Do you know if the plans that they have include a new fountain?
I don't know for sure if they're going to be rehabbing or replacing the fountain. I think they're still very early, and that's a decision that hasn't been made yet.
Okay, assuming that it's, that's loud. Assuming that it's still cooperates with the ecological habitat that they're trying to preserve there. I think that it's always nice to not have stagnant water for mosquito-borne illnesses. So if we could sweet talk them into putting a fountain there, I think that would be a great idea. Get it back going again. And it is iconic for Norman. So yeah, I look forward to seeing it bring back the life that we had before with it.
Thank you, Councilor Patron. I think I saw Councilor Hall's hand up too.
Yeah, I was really curious about the fountain too, and I'm always glad when Dr. Evenson is in on the call, because I also have been over to the duck pond of late, and you know, to the uneducated eye that knows nothing about pond management, it does look like a really sad place compared to other times in the past. And I'm pretty sure, looking around, I am the elder of this group and have been enjoying and using the duck pond since I arrived on the campus at OU in 1971. And so when you mentioned about the management techniques that they're using and not mowing to the edge, and that is really that's really an interesting thing for me to know and to understand. And maybe a fountain is completely contraindicated to what they're trying to do with pond management, but I agree, it was always such a pretty thing. And I was really struck with just the what seemed to me as stagnant water and no movement of water, and Of course, it is the summer, but I am just curious about that from, you know, your technical expertise. Is that normal to be expected? I mean, we do have mosquito populations that we certainly try to mitigate. And so I was just really struck by the stagnation of the water.
Yeah, and so especially smaller ponds, smaller bodies of water like this, and you know, with a large bird population, the nutrient input into that, especially during the summer when we have a lot of sunshine, warm days, that's a prime environment for algae to grow. It occurs in a lot of ponds across Norman, across the state. It's a natural process. Water does flow through the pond. It's got an outlet, so it does flow under Lindsay Street and goes and follows on down Bishop. But it slows down right there at the pond. So, you know, you're going to see something like that, and you can manage it. It just depends on how much you want to do how much input you want to put into it to manage it. You know, active management like aeration through the fountain can get quite costly if you're having to put that electrical input into running that fountain 24/7, right? So you want to look at what are some other ways that you can manage the nutrients in the water. You can do that through aquatic plants, right? Those plants take up those nutrients, help to clean up the water. You can look at ways to kind of control the bird population. That's difficult to do though, because it's a migratory species. You get what you get, and lots of people, it's called the duck pond. You want to see ducks and geese, right? So it can be managed. It just depends on how much effort and input you want to add to that system.
So is the mosquito population, is that a significant concern on your part in this particular situation?
I haven't received very many complaints about mosquitoes in that area. Judd may know a little bit more on the park side if they've gotten any particular calls on this. For this body of water, I haven't really seen that as much of an issue. Usually when I get calls on mosquitoes, it's smaller, stagnant water that sits in, you know, tires or barrels or small puddles for a significant period of time behind people's houses. And that's when you start to see those mosquito populations. You want to see that water moving through. And for green infrastructure, you know, you don't want water to sit more than 48 hours. That's when you start to see mosquito populations. But if you've got in a pond like this, if you have fish and other types of organisms that can control the mosquito larvae, you know, that's all part of the ecosystem there.
Well, I am encouraged to know that you are part of the conversation and that there is something, you know, being worked on the OU side, because I do get a lot of comments about this too. And it's a place that I think a lot of people enjoy using right in, you know, the heart of Norman. So I'm all on board, and any kind of cooperative arrangement that we might want to pursue with OU, but I'm really encouraged to know that you're in communication and that you can hopefully keep us posted. And, you know, if there's a way that we could come up with some kind of collaboration, I'm certainly interested in that, because it is an iconic park. It's been there for a long time. And I'm so glad we brought it up, honestly, because I've had a lot of people comment on it and I've wondered about it myself because I've been there several times. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilor Hall. Councilor Peacock.
Yeah, thanks. Regarding these last few comments, yeah, I think there's an opportunity for another partner at the table on this one. I went through the Nature Conservancy's Leadership Academy a couple of years ago, and in that experience, several times I talked to people about the Norman Duck Pond and what a jewel it was. And, you know, in those discussions, we talked about the possibility of even looking at it as a case study in urban conservation. So there really might be the opportunity to pursue some federal grants, some conservation grants. At least bringing them to the table, I think, would be a smart first step, and kind of just seeing what all the options were. I know they work a lot with conservation easements, in which basically, the university would deed the land to TNC, Nature Conservancy, and they would protect it in perpetuity, basically just looking after the conservation of it. So that might be an answer to the maintenance issue. Another possible answer to that maintenance issue is there's a program in Oklahoma City called Saturday Morning Sweep, in which the city essentially pays for a dumpster, sends it out on site, volunteers organize around to clean up, and then the city pays to have the dumpster hauled off. So I think there's actually enough of an appetite around this particular property that you could get quite a bit of volunteer enthusiasm around it, and it wouldn't be that hard to get even a monthly pickup going. So I love the duck pond. My kids love the duck pond. Let's make it awesome.
You know what? I can't recall, Councilmember Holman, maybe in your, vault up there, you might know this, but it's been decades, but there was a Save the Duck Pond campaign at one point, and, significant improvements happened at the duck pond, and they did a fundraiser with graphic artists, local graphic artists that were well known to the community to create posters and help raise money. So it's happened at least one time in the past that I'm aware of.
Not to mention, we have all the wonderful Firehouse Art Center ducks around town that could be really used in a great marketing campaign. Exactly what Councilmember Hall was talking about.
Yeah, I would absolutely add to that I'd love to see just, further efforts at preservation of this park. And I always do have to remind people that the duck pond is really just a part of Bishop Creek, feeds down into the river. But and I think the cleanup thing would be a great idea, because I have some of the comments and concerns I've seen from people is about debris and trash building up around the edges of the pond, and in the water even, and things like that. And I think I might, since Sean's with us too, might have him talk just a little bit about, because I've heard this thing brought up over the years about this, that when Lindsay Street was improved a decade or so ago, the street was raised higher than it was, I think, before, when it was just a 2-lane street. It was kind of a real big dip down in there. And so some have thought that that road project altered the flow of water through the duck pond, and that's why it's been in such bad shape. I don't think that's the case, but since we're here, we might
Sure.
might
Happy
shed some
to. Yeah, that was about 2008. For the other council members, it was a bond project that was approved by the voters in 2005, widening Lindsay Street from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. You mentioned earlier, someone did about parking along Lindsay that was available until that project happened. I worked really closely with the university. We did replace that. It's a bridge that's considered a bridge across Lindsay Street from the duck pond to the south and Bishop Creek. We did replace that bridge, went through a pretty elaborate floodplain permitting process. We did not raise any of the water features or the water resources there, and in fact improved a bridge that was falling apart. So I think that it was a major project certainly, but no negative impacts to the water resources. Just a speculation here, council members, just as I'm hearing this discussion about maintenance, you all know that the university has gone through some major budget cutting measures in the last 2 years, and the biggest cuts came to their landscape division. They used to have a wonderful landscape group. Judd knows them well. We know them well. We work really closely with them on Lindsay Street project, but I was hearing layoffs of 50 or more landscape staff. I think that's accurate, maybe worse than that, but I suspect that's what we're seeing at the duck pond and throughout the university. Their landscape just isn't being maintained like it was a few years ago. It was spectacular. It was wonderful. I think that's what happens when you cut back on staff, and we have the same issue in our stormwater division. We don't have enough staff to keep up with our our infrastructure either. And we get those same complaints. We just can't get to it. So I think they're dealing with some of the same things we are.
I appreciate that clarification and information, Sean. I think that's real helpful for everybody to understand the background and kind of what's going on there. And so, yeah, I would think it would be maybe as important as ever for us to explore whatever options might be available to help out. I'm definitely interested in exploring options for easements for future stormwater purposes along the channel. If OU would be interested, and definitely any efforts that we can help out on with cleanup efforts and stuff like that, and getting the whatever we can do to encourage OU. I know Matt Rom pretty well. He's been very active in city issues before, and I think a lot of people would love to see that fountain running again. I think that would be just a real nice thing, and it is very iconic. And if it doesn't disturb the ecosystem in a negative way, and I would hope it wouldn't, since it was there for so long, running for so long. But maybe they discovered it was a problem, and that's why they turned it off. But anyway, I look forward. Are there any further comments, questions from council about this?
Councilmember Holman, I would just like to add, I just want to
Yes.
kind of put in a plug. Well, we haven't done a particular cleanup at the duck pond because that is OU property, requires special permission for us to conduct any type of cleanup event or anything like that. We do cleanup events across the city. And in fact, I'm going to put a plug in for the Stormwater Division coming up. We're going to finally get back to some of our public education and outreach in a socially distanced, masked way. Coming up on October 4th, we're going to have a cleanup at Crestland Park. That's in the Lake Thunderbird watershed. We're starting our regular October Lake Thunderbird watershed blitz. So Crestland is first. And then on October 11th, we'll be having a cleanup along 12th southeast from Boyd down to Lindsay. If you've driven that stretch of 12th, you know there's quite a bit of debris that has collected along that treed fence line. It's in need, so we're going to get some volunteers hopefully and get out and clean that up. And then at Saxon Park I almost have all these dates memorized, on the 25th, we'll be doing another cleanup in Lake Thunderbird watershed, and it'll all wrap up on November the 1st with our Lake Thunderbird watershed celebration workshop. It's going to be at the state park, at the day use area at the end of Alameda. We've got some pavilions reserved out there. We'll do our workshop, and then we'll do our state park cleanup like we have been doing for the past, I think this is our 4th annual Lake Thunderbird watershed workshop. And we're going to be working with the cities of Oklahoma City and more to conduct those events. So while we haven't done anything at the duck pond yet, and we'll talk to Matt and we'll see if that's something that OU can partner with us on, or if we can partner with OU as they schedule something. We do have other things coming up, and we're going to get our Artful Inlets painted on October 2nd and 3rd. It will not be a big public event like we had hoped, but we will be at Second Friday in October. It will be a virtual presentation of the next 5 Artful Inlets. So sorry, just got to plug the Stormwater Division activities while I've got a chance.
Absolutely. You're always welcome to plug the Stormwater Division in this committee.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that information, and maybe in a few months, maybe we can come back and get an update on how things are going at the duck pond. So anyway, if there's no other further questions, comments from council on this item, I don't see any. Okay. Then we'll move on to the last item, which is just miscellaneous discussion. Is there anything any committee members have they'd like to mention, say? No? Okay. I have one. I would just request, like I did before the last home game, Manager Pyle, would you mind having the street sweeper make a run through Campus Corner before Saturday?
We will make that so.
Just got to put our best face on when we got visitors coming over.
Yeah, Councilmember Holman, you don't have to request that. That is part of our regular duties in the
Okay.
Stormwater Division. Our our street sweepers go Friday before game day through Campus Corner and Main Street. And then Sunday night into Monday morning, we go back through that area when there aren't cars parked and sweep again after. So that's routine. That's part of our activities.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If that's it, that's all I have. And I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.